And I'm here this morning with
Lee Hammond, account manager for the Ballard Agency.
And Kelly Davis. I am the manager of the Ballard Agency.
they are insurance experts, and we'd like to go ahead and pick their brain for you about cybersecurity insurance and how to be mindful of your privacy when you're speaking with an insurance agent.
So, Kim, we see a lot of awareness for cyber liability insurance these days, and primarily because claims are rising so quickly. There's a lot of exposures people have to being attacked that they may not even realize that they have. And we see with more transactions, financial transactions, and so forth going on, we see concerns about e commerce. We see concerns about privacy of information, which is probably the greatest concern. Um, you can see malware hacks, you can see ransomware attacks that can really cripple an organization. So there are a lot of things that people really don't realize they're open to that we can help address through the liability insurance.
So that is not a standard rider on most insurance policies. That is a specific, you have to get cybersecurity insurance, the same way you would get flood insurance specifically. You want to walk us through the process of how you would apply for that? And are there any
Sure,
special things that you would need to keep in mind?
sure. There are, when a person or a business has pretty limited exposure, if you don't do e commerce and so forth, you can get some very limited insurance on a business type policy. But for most anyone who has private information, such as we would have at an insurance agency, you want to be very careful about that. And that exposure sort of lifts it to another level. That's when we do a separate liability policy. So what will usually happen, there's an application that you would complete, and it tells a little about your business and what your activities and operations are. You talk about the services you provide, and that helps the underwriters look at how at risk you may be for being sued for professional advice, and yourself for being hacked and so forth. They will do a quote that's based on that operation, and then they'll provide you a proposal that gives you a breakdown of the types of situations that the policy will cover and what limits are provided for those. And it can look a little overwhelming when you first see the proposals, but you begin to see kind of how all those pieces dovetail. Data breach response, for example. If you, the first step, if you find that you have been breached, is to stop the flow of blood, basically. Um, you want to immediately contact either the insurance company, which we do have access to some companies who have teams of response personnel, and you want to close the gate. You want to make certain that people are notified that there's been a breach, and you want to make sure you find out how it happened and how to make certain it doesn't happen again going forward. And that's where folks like yourself come in.
Privacy is beforehand. This is the decisions about what you consider valuable and how you're going to act upon it. The sort of policy and decisions that you make before anything happens. Are you going to have an acceptable use policy? Does everybody know about it? Do you have a password policy? Does everybody know about it? But more importantly, it's which parts of your business are connected to each other on talking to each other directly on information, and do people have the right mindset of how to value that information and keep that value in mind with every time they're touching the information, because the information would be your business's intellectual property or your customers, and so it's really the core heart of your business. So if someone has done some business policies that support being privacy aware, that would both help with their premiums and with the response and being covered after. Are there some things that you have seen that are little gotchas that people don't consider that may stop them from having their coverage apply, so they may have insurance but it doesn't become effective, they don't get any relief from it using it, they say, sorry, you're removed?
There are a lot of specific steps that underwriters will look for. One of the ones we see the most often is multi-factor authentication. They'll want to see that there are steps in place that will alert anyone to unauthorized access. They want to make certain that all updates are done. As surprisingly easy, but that's one of the biggest ways that people end up exposed to problems that they may not even realize.
For anyone who's not familiar, multi-factor authentication is having more than one way prove that you're the real genuine person who's allowed to use these things. So traditionally most people would have a username and password. Well, this is adding on something in addition to it, having a code, having a fingerprint, having a token that gets scanned, some second way that isn't going to be just somebody guesses your password or hacks someone else's system to get your password. Because everything's connected online, which means someone else's breach may affect you, and likewise your breach may affect someone else.
It's surprising when it happens too. In fact, I recently experienced it myself. I had a breach of my Microsoft online email, my Microsoft Exchange email, and was completely unaware of it until I started getting emails from all of the contacts in my address book. And it was a spoof attempt to try to solicit funds. And the response from our insurance companies we partner with, it was a fairly intense process that we had to go through, closing that gap. It's difficult sometimes to figure out where it came from, but we had to go through a fairly involved process to find out what we could do to stop it.
There are some basic things that you can be mindful of every day. Every day is an intentional decision that helps with staying focused on your business. It helps your mental stability, and it helps you be less vulnerable to people trying to take advantage of you. If you look around and you notice what's happening around you and you make deliberate decisions of how you see it and what you're going to do about it. We've had a lot of changes, speaking of people looking around and being well. COVID has hit people very hard. A lot of people are more online now than they ever have been. On the education side, that has moved things forward 5 to 10 years for people being online for education. I know that businesses for meetings have struggled to keep up, and it can be challenging. What would you tell your 2019 self?
Probably that you're going to have to adapt to a lot of new etiquette, for one. There's considerations to setting up any kind of virtual access, and I'm sure your expertise is going to be the most helpful, but you do have to keep in mind that any platform that you use to meet virtually can be open to being hacked or accessed. So you need to treat that with the same regard that you would documents or electronic files. It's just like texting or emailing. That information can be seen, and you have to take steps before you participate in it to make sure that you don't open yourself up to divulging private information by accident, just through online conversation.
In general, when someone comes to speak with a professional to get insurance for their business, are there some tips that you would give them for finding someone who takes their privacy seriously as a matter of consideration? What should you look for in an insurance provider, an agency, to know that you are being taken care of appropriately?
It can be a little challenging to find agents that work with cyber liability a lot. It's a very rapidly changing field, so it's something that I take classes fairly regularly in that to try to keep up. Um, some of our insurance companies that we actually write policies with have some very dedicated teams of folks that will consult with someone in the event of a claim, and they'll help manage response. They might help you with regulatory fines, which is something someone might not even think of. Some states have privacy violation fines that you can face, and they can be significant. Um, that's one of the biggest things, is to make sure that they can explain to you how the policy is going to respond, but also how the company will respond in the event of a claim.
And to Kim, I would like to add that if somebody's asking about cyber liability, what we as insurance professionals should do is, in return, ask questions. We can't very well tell them what type of cyber liability policy to get unless we know what they're needing to have protected. So it's more important to me to be asking questions to get those answers, so then we can try to advise and build the protection that they may need. It's not really a one size fits all kind of category, as most insurance is not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm. But as having to ask what your business does to get an appropriate level of protection for general liability or for errors and omissions or any other type of claim, you're going to be speaking with them about details about their business. Are there things that you would want to look at to make sure that you're speaking with a reputable agent who will treat your records with respect?
It's and I may look to you for some help here too. You want to make sure that you get the sense that there's an emphasis on privacy as opposed to convenience. There's one example. We a lot of times will take payments from folks via credit card, and we have some customers who will ask us if we can store that information so that they can just call us and say, can you make a payment from my credit card on file? You have to be willing to educate folks and say, the reason I can't keep that on file is that it puts you at risk as well as us. So you want to make sure that you have someone who can explain to you why some of these steps are needed. And I think partnering with a group like Privacy Test Drive can help you when you're identifying. It's sort of like protecting your home from burglars. once you can have someone explain to you how you may be vulnerable, that really helps you think ahead to what things you're going to need to make decisions about. As you said, I think that's a great term. But also what protection you need for something that could still happen regardless of the steps you've taken.
Are there any final gems of wisdom you'd like to pass on to our audience?
Lee has said it about all.
Okay.
She covers it. She has 40 years of experience in the commercial insurance, so there's not too many people that know more than she knows.
That's
she shares a lot of information, and we just want to make sure everybody knows. Obviously we have the knowledge here at the Ballard Agency. There's other good agencies. You just want to make sure that somebody is asking you questions about your business. If they're not asking you questions about your business, then they're treating you like anybody else, and you are specific to what your needs are. That would be the first clue. Instead of somebody just trying to sell a policy, they're trying to make sure that you got the protection you need.
right.
If they're asking questions.
Yes.
This is why we have a wonderful gem here, finding them. And thank you very much for your time and consideration watching our event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.